Hello and thank you. Thanks millions, Alexander, for everything and all the organizing committee. So today we will talk a little bit about the technological and philosophical matter of how species meet, as Donna Haraway would say, and then we will investigate the way new technologies like voice-activated virtual assistants, they come into our domestic soundscape, and what influences do they bring. So my first slide, the paradox of companion species, which we will explain in a few minutes, depicts my most favorite movie, Metropolis. I will tell you more about it and how everything is connected. But let's start from the beginning of what I would like to tell you today. We live in the Anthropocene, as many disciplinaries like to call it. Even it is suggested that it should be a new geological epoch. It should be a new geological time, and it has to do with what collective human activity has done to the planet. All the overexploitation, the disruption of ecosystems, the extinction of species, and all the bad things you can imagine that we have this earth. So all the disciplines talk about Anthropocene and how we get there, but Donna Haraway challenges this term, and she says that Anthropocene is just a boundary event, nothing this huge, just like a moment in time, and we should overcome it instead of thinking about all the disasters that came with it. And if we blend as a species and we accompany one species another, beyond human exceptionalism, if we accept animals and technology in symbiotic and symbiotic practices, then we can move to Cthulhucene, and we indeed can do something better for the future of it. So she suggests that we can call these new species, this blending, as companion species, meaning that the ecologies she suggests that are always threefold. It includes human and all the non-human, meaning the animals and the technologies. So all these entities, they can move on to a post-cyborg era. For the ones that you are familiar with Cyborg Manifesto, you may know the blending she has in her mind of the chimeric organisms between man and machine. So these post-cyborg entities, they enter together in the companion species in the Cthulhucene, and they do something that it is productive so as to move on instead of waiting for disasters to come with us. So now I will change the subject a little bit, but you will see how these blend together. In the companion species, Donna Haraway says that technologies and cyborgian entities, they are new. If we compare it with the other species, like humans and animals, that they have evolved together for like thousands of years. Yet, the most newcomers of technologies and companion species are the voice-activated virtual assistants. Maybe you're familiar with them, maybe not. They have taken over the mainstream market for like 1 year and a half. And they are these small machines, you see, that we leave them in the house or we connect them with all other devices in the context of Internet of Things, and they do tasks for us. The issue with these ones is that the devices, they are quite small, and all of them, the most known ones used in mainstream and households are these ones. They are female voiced. And this is something that raises many questions. I have to tell you that before I submitted the abstract, I saw no scientific papers on the issue. And now that I was writing the paper, I saw a few, which is good news. At least, you know, a scientific community has come to it to investigate what is the case with all the female-voiced assistants. So the one case with the machines is that we always like to give them human characteristics. In Greek, we use anthropomorphism. It's a Greek word, and it means to imply that machines, animals, and whatever else, they have human characteristics. It is comfortable for us, yes, and it also highlights human excellence, since we don't comply to the manners and behaviors of other species, but we try to communicate with them as we would do in our language and in our semiotics. So we have all these new technologies, language processing, artificial intelligence, that make machines more human-like in many ways and characteristics. So this is not, we could view it not as bad if we wouldn't impose all the social norms that come from our society. And it is what Haraway says, that what once was fiction comes to life, and we have science fiction and science coming together into Cthulhucene. So as Milena presented, so there is, I think most of you were in the keynote, and we need not to tell more about how voice, we use voice to understand about the gender identity and all the social characteristics that come with it. So people love to communicate in natural language, love to hear the voices, and it is their main means of communication. And it is expected that within the next decade, humans will interact with computers mainly with natural language, as they do with these devices that we saw. So it's very important to highlight what is the case with a female voice in these assistive technologies. We could broaden it a lot, you know, because we could say, you know, in the GPS we have female voices, in the public transport we have female voices, but I thought about narrowing it down a little bit, because this is something very new that is coming. So we want the machines and virtual assistants to be so human. There is all these magazines that make comparisons between these machines, and they measure the level of humanity so as to make the machines, they say, oh, this is good because it's so human, the level of humanity is high, and the machine, the other one, has a low level of humanity, so it's not good. This is the criterion that is used, you know, in the mainstream. So we can say that yes, we use human communication patterns for to communicate with machines and animals. Yes, we use anthropomorphism a lot. But we also impose all the social norms coming with it. So we see that we attribute the roles to these devices, both in labor and in the household, that are socially attributed to women, to do service work, to be dictated in a way. So in the household, they do take upon tasks that are not very hard, but they do service. And in work, they do what a secretary would do, not something more complex than that. So they don't have occupational roles. Yes, they do have roles more secretarial. So the paradox is, for me at least, as I can see it, that indeed Haraway is totally correct. We go in this involution together, both the man and machine. We cannot live without the machine now. Think about your days without a laptop or a cell phone. Indeed, we are very dependent on each other, and indeed, if we want to do something better, to move to an epoch where things will be, you know, more optimistic, we have to include all the other ecologies along with ours. But the case is, and this is the paradox, if we impose again human exceptionalism in this new epoch, then we have a paradox, because it's like going forth and going back. And then what's the case if we do the social norming to the machine and to the animals and so on? So the idea is that if we want to queer the non-human, we have to queer the human. But I think this is still, unfortunately, far away from human societies. And that would be maybe a suggestion, at least for the activist groups. And if one asks Alexa if she is a feminist, this is what she answers. Yes, I am a feminist. But, you know, obviously, she is not. So now, a few things about how these female voices contribute to the domestic soundscape. We have more anthropophonic sounds in the domestic soundscape like this. We can say that human species have always been kind of cyborgian because they love to imbue technology in their life. So language is one of the main technologies human species has used, and is the basis of any other technology. So anthropophony, and which includes all the human sounds, all the sounds produced by human activity, to be more correct, has a profound impact on domestic soundscape. Imagine a household with no human activity or no human voices. It would be too barren. So as technology becomes ubiquitous, we have the voice of the new devices, because they use natural voice, to be indistinguishable between all the other machinery sounds in the household and the human voices and so on. So actually, by inducing talking machines to the household, we have more electrified voices, as Shaffer would say, but with a big distinction this time. There is no juxtaposition of different device that reproduces a different voice, the schizophonic effect. In this manner, we used, for example, we used to have the radio to listen to something, and we would listen to a voice of a human, and the radio being the medium. So we have a medium, a device, producing a voice, and we have the schizophrenic effect. But now the machine has its own voice. So this is different from all the other electrified voices we have in the domestic soundscape. Also, virtual assistants do not have a body, which means they only have a voice. We listen to them, but mainly we do not see them. This, one could say, is like the very silent servants of previous centuries, that they were inducted to do something, you know, but they were almost absent from the household. And also we tend to give characteristics. There is a connotation there. Even if they don't have a body, we have the connotation that they are female, and female doing service for us. So this is my last slide, so I will conclude with this. I don't have very specific conclusions to make because there is not much scientific work, and these technologies are, you know, quite expensive yet, but let's sum things up. We see that these devices, these virtual assistants within the domestic soundscape and environment, they adhere to what is acceptable in society for women, both in domestic care and labor. Some people argue that it doesn't have to do with sexism, you know, because humans like female voices better. This is what they are used to as feeding in the belly of their mothers, so they are used to it. I am not quite sure about it, and also that humans prefer women to do this kind of caring because they, some scientists propose that there is a natural affinity for service work and emotional caring that women have. But what I would like to see is that we love the she machine. The first slide of Metropolis shows the she machine, and you will find a line in the movie saying she is the most perfect and most obedient machine man has ever made, and I strongly believe that virtual assistants, they are so close to this, and hence we are in a paradox. We are in the companion species time, but we would like to impose what we know well, human exceptionalism of Anthropocene upon all other ecologies. So that was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Any questions? Yes?
Thank you. I guess I really like your results, but I could also add something. Maybe this schizophrenia, maybe then it started to be irrelevant and also maybe being accepted, because being sick, being fucked up is also okay. No? Like it's this is the thing that maybe we should accept, and at least started to accept, and then look of this any other machines. And I had another example of this. I don't know, like it was half a year ago or 1 year ago. They produced this robot, and the two of them, they started to start their language without the control.
Yes, the chatbots. Yes.
Shut down. It's like they did this maybe thinking, oh yeah, the female voice is like more as the service, they use as a service and so on. But I guess it's going out their hands. You know, this is like a kind of. I don't know. It's not under control anymore. So they are becoming much more visible, and we can also see the positive parts of how they will be in the future.
Indeed.
I really like it, your presentation.
Thank you very much. Can I, excuse me, add something? I read something very interesting, that there is a dad saying, we were in a table and having lunch, and my daughter prayed to Alexa. Alexa is one of the devices. Said, "Dear Alexa, please do this for me." And this is how things come. You know, this is the case. People love social norms. Moms are missing from home because they have started to taking upon male social roles, which I totally reject. But anyway, but we also raise the kids like this. So, you know, the daughter was missing a mommy like, and she was too embarrassed afterwards, obviously.
Oh, I have so many things to say, and I'm going to try to keep it short. Thank you so much. But I guess mostly I wanted to say, well, just a very small bit in people don't know this. Cortana is a video game character. You know that?
Yes, yes, yes.
Cortana is a character from the series Halo, and she is the holographic artificial intelligence, but she also, throughout the whole series, has a love affair with the main commander that you play. So, already she's coming from a gendered, context of romantic relationship. So, I mean, that one of the elephants in the room is that it becomes, it's not just a companion species, it's also a romantic companion species. And,
have you watched the movie She? Oh, no,
yeah,
Her.
Yeah, of course. So that links up with so much that you said. The movie Her, it's really worth watching. It's about near future, it's an affair with the operating system who is, but only through her voice. But also I had to Google the name, but the article is called "A Holographic Virtual Girlfriend Lives Inside Japan's Answer to the Amazon Echo," and it's the Japanese version of the Home Assistant. It's a holographic, anime character who's it's for lonely salarymen to come home to. The wife, the girlfriend is missing. So this holographic girlfriend serves all the companion needs, but also provides caring. Anyway, I didn't mean to go on that tangent. I just wanted to say you hit such a good point with the paradox that the promise of technology, as Donna Haraway, wanted to imagine, is that it can become, post-gender and just. Because it doesn't need to be gendered, but then we keep imposing these norms.
Exactly.
And now they're okay because it's not about a real person. Canada just opened its first, and in England it already exists, brothel serviced by sex robots.
Yes.
So now that's okay because they're not people.
Yes, and
we're in the era, at least in Canada and North America, there's so much activism by sex workers for empowerment and recognition of their labor. And at the same time, there's this brothel that's open with sex robots who's going to undercut their put them out of work, literally, and it's going to be okay to do anything there because it's robots.
And I wanted to add something to what you said, that psychologists say they have observed that when you have anthropophony in the in the domestic soundscape, then social narratives evolve. So this is why old people, they put on the TV and it's playing, although now they can even speak to the devices and start a discussion. And this is very interesting, if psychologists are interested to see what happens. Yes?
Yeah, thank you for the talk. Super interesting. And I wanted to stay with the trouble, so to speak. Haha, Haraway. But the term anthropophony, I very much like, and I'm just wondering if you know of, or if there exists a stronger term that really indicates the sexism that's being carried over into these spaces. I'm sure there's racism, evidence of racism as well. And if there isn't, I'd really like to start playing with that, and make it evident, and that this is a system, right, that's being carried over into these other systems. And just curious if
I don't think so. I don't think so that it exists, but I have to say here that I'm no expert in sound ecology. Obviously, my main theme is posthumanism, cyborgism, and this kind of stuff. So maybe there are some terminology here that maybe I am missing something. But as far as the other terminology is concerned, I don't think there is existing one.
Okay, last one.
To add on And to add on you, for example, if you listen to the available voices that are for example for answer, and you compare this with a mind map of what voices exist available, they are always the typical voice, so to say. Although they are not visible, they, for example, in English, you have this ultra-typical English well-speaking voice.
Middle class.
Yeah.
Middle class, educated,
Yeah.
so you can say the voice itself doesn't have a skin color, but it's at least it implies that
Sure,
this
the
is not
class.
an immigrant background and so
Socioeconomic
on.
status, etc.
Yeah.
That, you know, everything that comes with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Unfortunately, I need to cut this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you too so much.
Let me just make sure this. Okay. Okay. Hello. All right. So I'm mainly an artist, installation artist. Right now, working in technology, sound editing. But I'm kind of moving into this a more theoretical space here with this. So I'm pulling connections from queer theory and feminist studies into the sound space and sort of analyzing art installation from this phenomenological perspective. So this paper considers Soundscape, specifically sound installation works, as instigating a queer phenomenology of space in public environments in the art gallery by blurring the lines of listening conventions through a reconfiguring of our perceptual reality. Taking primarily from Sarah Ahmed's theories of queer phenomenology, various phenomenological philosophers' notions of embodiment and consciousness, and concepts of the world's soundscape as composition, I seek to describe how these works disorient and reorient the listener towards layered, multi-perspectival, vulnerable, complex interactions in space, rather than adhering to social contextual binaries, traditional limited forms of viewing and perceiving. And encouraging and embracing a queer phenomenology or an active orientation in listening, particularly a sort of sonic disorientation, we become aware of the fluid exchanges between perception, body, and environment. Such engagement encourages a joint body context that makes socio-spatial constructions less rigid, i.e. the distinctions between performance space, art space, public space, hierarchies between art object and viewer, between the visual and the felt, refocusing on our actual orientation, subjective orientation, our unique internal spaces, and more authentic immediate engagements with and responses to art. I will touch on, so I narrowed from the entirety of soundscape studies and sound installation, sound art, I sort of narrowed it down into 4 artists' works that I feel have sort of led us into this queer sound space and really on multiple levels break down the instigating of promote the instigating of a queer phenomenology of space. And so, let's see. Phenomenology has a fairly obvious connection to sound through its tie to phenomena, whether analyzed through the senses, embodiment, or the framing of perception. But I want to focus not only on sound as observational or phenomena as a media, but on a phenomenology that is relational, that is embodied, effective, and deconstructs phenomenology itself and its application. A queer phenomenology is not an orientation of the majority. It does not assume a universal human perception or relationship to objects. Rather, it is what becomes visible and accessible when we turn the tables on our orientations to constructions of reality. It implies that our orientation in space is fixed, only based on how society makes room for us or does not, how society puts certain objects within reach for certain people and for others not, how preferences are given to those who fit better within certain spaces. And so when we attempt to liberate ourselves from what society puts within our reach, we realize that nothing is actually fixed or predetermined, but only determinate of our actions, positions, and how our sense of identity imposes limitations on our orientation. And so Sarah Ahmed states in Queer Phenomenology is that phenomenology can offer a resource for queer studies insofar as it emphasizes the importance of lived experience, the intentionality of consciousness, the significance or nearness of what is ready to hand, the role of repeated and habitual actions in shaping bodies and worlds. Phenomenology, after all, is full of queer moments, moments of disorientation, which involve not only the intellectual experience of disorder, but the vital experience of, other sensory emotions. And so in Queer Use, Ahmed talks about how phenomenology reveals how social relations are arranged spatially, how queerness disrupts and reorders these relations by not following the accepted paths, and how a politics of disorientation puts other objects within reach, those that might at first glance seem awry. So these orientations and reorientation affects what is proximate to the body or what can be reached. So we might ask, what is a normative orientation of art viewing, or in this case, listening? What are accessible modes of listening in Western society? Listening on headphones to a car stereo or a surround sound home theater system. Stereo itself is, a very common embrace convention, but it limits listening experience. All of these forms of listening are formed and therefore limited by technology, money, industry, and use. How we listen is dictated by the ways we are taught to use space, how we are able to orient our attention, what sounds we are able to access. How do we listen in a rock show versus in our bedroom, in a public space versus private? Different notions of intimacy are embedded in the listening process. Do we listen less in a social environment? Are social environments more about the sound of voices talking than listening? Is the silence of mass voices actually more dense than those that have power and privilege to make sound? Orientation is key in both creation and reception of our sonic environments. As Ahmed states, queer phenomenology draws out the possibility of queer theory as a kind of critical intervention in social theory, radical deconstructionism. By deconstructing and intervening, in this case in sound space, we are breaking down our experience of normative audio environments, creating unconventional listening experiences. There is something to be found in the possibility of never being committed to a gallery, a music hall, this fluidity of space, never sound or music, but site-specific and adaptive that can pave a path for queer listening, which is how I would constitute the field of sound art. The works, in a sense, are queer, not only in the orientation we have to them in forging new paths, but in opening up modes of perception. Soundscapes have the ability to create these perceptive moments of disorder, awareness, orientation, emotional and physiological response in order to reorient us. They refocus our attention from object to experience, from looking at to listening to, from seeing to being within. We are pushed to become aware of our orientation in space, not only within the art or performance setting, but our orientation to the soundscape itself. When we create new paths of listening or creation between music and sound, we inevitably dismantle the hierarchies and formalities that promote exclusivity, in a sense democratizing the sound space or the listening environment. And so I'm going to go on. While we create distinctions between music and sound, listening through the body and the ears, various composers have considered, such as Pauline Oliveros, John Cage, they promote reorienting ourselves to hear the sound field of the world as a composition and to listen to the sound within our entire bodies. The idea that you're not only hearing from your ears, but you're hearing, listen with your leg or listen with your arm, or there's other orientations even within your body that you can listen from. To listen is to enter a spatiality by which at the same time I am penetrated, for it opens me up as well as around me, and from me as well as toward me, it opens me up inside and out. It is through such a double, quadruple, or sextuple opening of a self can take place. Immersed in sound, the subject loses itself and in many ways loses its sense, because hearing is not a discrete sense. To hear is to also be touched, both physically and emotionally. These very characteristics rattle the foundations of Western metaphysics and Western culture generally by questioning the status of the object and subject simultaneously. And so now I'm going to move on to the artworks, and we have a piece by Janet Cardiff, George Gutierrez Miller, Marion Amache, and let's see, I'll cover Tim Brunage's Mirrors and Lamont Young Dream House. Okay, so I'll start with, actually first I'm going to go. So before I go into the artworks, I just want to talk on the modes of disorientation in these sound spaces. So these are all examples of things that these installations do, sort of from top to bottom. So techniques for creating soundscapes that shift your perception, sort of reorient your listening in this way, disorient and reorient. So methods would be superposing real on real, so real sound on real, superimposing the otherworldly on the real, displacing sound into a new environment, diffusion, so the way that sound is diffused spatially through various speakers, the way it moves, creating a hyperreality, staging chance synchronicity, merging sensory worlds, psychoacoustic and physiological manipulation, nonlinear time, non-place, so in between spaces that don't have specific sort of social conventions, and encouraging mobility of the listener. And so I'll start with so Janet Cardiff and George Gutierrez Miller. And I'm reading from the description from the Documenta. This piece was composed in 2012 for the Documenta festival. It's called Forest. So maybe I'll actually play a clip first. Okay. Which won't play because...
You have the clip on the laptop?
Yeah, I'm going to have to open it and... How much time do you have?
Like control and click on it?
Yeah.
Did you put the sound files in my laptop? Because if you didn't...
No, it's it's a link, hyperlink.
It's
So I have to open it on...
You can go to this slideshow and play for the
It doesn't work.
It doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Doesn't work.
Are we how much on time? So maybe I can play those after.
Like 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to describe, because it's going to take me a while to get the links up. So a remarkable thing about Janet Cardiff and George Gutierrez Miller's utterly captivating sound installation is that it blurs distinctions between sight and art. You enter a clearing forest, sit down on a wooden stump, and simply listen. Cardiff and Gutierrez Miller's work incorporates the actual forest into an audio composition emitted from more than 30 speakers. Sometimes there is near synchronicity of natural mediated sounds, and it's tough to discern what is live and what is recorded. On a sunny day, you hear the rustling breeze, but also the recording of a dramatically escalating wind that sounds intensely real. You sonically register the storm that it is approaching, even though your eyes tell you otherwise. When you hear a branch loudly snap overhead, you become instantly fearful and flinch. The recorded sounds move in a sphere around you, and you feel as if you're in the shifting presence of history. There are sounds of war, whistling, screeches, big explosions, the rat-a-tat of machine gun fire. There is a brief but shocking scream, a crashing tree, sounds of mother and child, clanging metal. Singers come close but then leave. You hear the trees and wind again, and the crickets and birds, in turn frightening and deeply touching, ominous and serene. So everything about this installation involves the process of disorienting and reorienting the listener. we start in a natural public environment. The soundscape of the forest is semi-fixed, and it allows for distant sounds to bleed into the ambience. But fairly immediate sounds are expected. Birds, leaves, trees sway, patter of small animals. Weather dictates the soundscape. We enter an environment that does not immediately seem framed in any way, just usual and natural, but then elements of the soundscape subtly change. Sounds that induce fear. A shift in the emotional space triggers a shift in reality. The subjectivity of fear affects people differently depending on their prior experience with those sounds. Certain bodies will have certain responses of threat. For a person who served in wartime, perhaps, or a civilian of war imposed on their home, these sounds may induce a sense of trauma. For many people, they would, at a base level, induce a fight or flight response. The subject returns to a natural animal state, hearing sounds of danger in an environment in which they do not quite fit. There becomes a dissociation between eye and ear. There becomes a questioning of what is real, what is seen, or what is heard. Where the natural sounds subtly line up with the recorded elements, the synchronicity encourages a moment of relief that only further solidifies the reality of the recorded soundscape. Depending on your spatial location, which stump you choose to sit on or how you move, your reality is morphed in various ways. Your nearness to perceived fear or safety may shift. Spatial diffusion through multiple speakers brings these sounds closer and further from your ear, shifting and reappearing. Then we have Marianne Amache.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep. Marianne Amache, this is her work City Links. It's a series of works she created through transmitting sound via high-frequency telephone lines from remote locations in her studio and other spaces over extended time periods. The pieces, installations, and performances integrated 2 or more distant locations in one space existing together in time. Some of the works went on over months or years, which allowed her to study the sound environment intently. The locations occurred from Buffalo to Boston to Chicago, Minneapolis, Cambridge, amongst other cities, in various environments like harbors, public squares, stores, airports, city streets, glass plants, a canal, and piers. Queer orientation, Marianne's work is illustrated in an idea of a fluid composition, multiple sound environments that can exist together and juxtapose each other as one. Other than the use of technological apparatus as in an intended location, the composition creates itself and allows for observation of both reality itself and the product of merged realities. It frames the world as a generative composition, an organic landscape, which exists and we can add to. It acknowledges simultaneous realities and multiple notions of time. She engages a frame synchronicity, making it possible for all of these isolated rooms to be heard in one sound space. So hearing synchronicity is a big, the remoteness and the synchronicity are sort of big queering themes in her work. Then we have Tim Brunages, and this is an example of creating a hyperreality. So amplifying sounds that exist in the room. People navigating the soundscape contribute to the sound space through the 2 concrete parabolic amplifiers. They each have a microphone in the middle and take on the sounds of whatever is going on in the space. The initial use of these structures was for military use to amplify the sound of approaching enemy fighter planes. The listener's orientation creates the disorientation of the sonic reality. Like the experience of clapping in a reverberant room, this work heightens any sound. The pieces take in various contexts, public squares to art galleries. In a private setting, the politics of place are a factor, and they may affect the person's ability to be within reach of the experience. In a public setting, there are, of course, less limitations on whom is able to experience the work, and there are increased uncontrollable factors affecting the experience, such as weather, passers-by. That said, with more sonic factors, certain sounds may be less accessible or masked by other sounds. there's a hierarchy of listening in both situations. In one, the intent focus of an isolated room brings us further away from environmental sounds, from uncontrolled noise. In the other, the focus of sounds on specific people or room may be lost in the density of the public soundscape. And for the last piece is Lamont Young, and I'll just quickly describe. It's been a product of over 40 years of collaboration with his partner, Marian Zazila, and it's installed as an ongoing piece in Tribeca Home. It disorients us in the form of sound waves being immersed in sine waves bouncing off one another in a magenta-hued wash of light. It presents the integration of sound with other experimental media, light, and draws attention to this experience in time. The longer we sit in this space, the more our perception of the space is morphed, and shifting orientation of the body, lying down, standing up, or sitting, or even the literal orientation of just the head will change the sound field. The experience of time is also dictated by the ability to come back and visit the space again at another time. The space, again, limited by a gallery-like setting, but in a home space with less limited viewing hours, open to the public at all times, does create a fixed, focused listening environment. Something that stands out distinctly from the other works is the creation of a mood space, not only through literal sound, but through the integration of multiple senses. The two intertwine and engage each other, creating a surreal or otherworldly reality. The piece feels less about morphing an existing reality, but taking us into an imagined reality. This type of what one might call a transcendent or meditative experience pulls us into the body with an awareness of consciousness in a way that is more isolated and therefore more internal. And what is even noticeable about many of these installations, but especially these, is the effect on your perception when leaving the environment. The feeling of being immersed in water, the sonic density, and then leaving and still feeling like you're in that perceptual space. Though there is a distinctive physiological effect, it's of course subjective for everyone. In a sense, the environment is peaceful, but it is impossible not to be engulfed. This is an experience of immersion that highlights the idea of being left with the feeling of bodily vulnerability, not only from the literal sound, but from the physics of sound waves, continuing to become undone after leaving an environment. And so to go back to this, just summarizing what these four pieces, how they disorient us in sound space. That's it.
Thank you very much, Jen. We have time for one question. Who was first? Yeah.
First of all, thank you. It was really great, and I'm happy to experience your presentation, because actually right now I'm also working on my thesis and dealing with alternative ways of perceiving through sound, especially in the club scene, techno scene, and going with this queering of modes of perception, not just in the theoretical way or sense of queering, but also in the way of, or in the perspective of actually what potentials are there for queer identities or for queer subjects. And then I came to the conclusion that this, what you described, this disorientation and this enforcement of bodily perception, emotional perception, is what kind of impacts our entrained, our socialized ways by our Western society of the ratio and the rational perception of things over our emotional and bodily perception, that we have unlearned by this socialization to listen to our bodily perception. And then I came to the conclusion why, for example, club scene is still a room or a safe space for so many queer identities, that it these are places where you can relearn this bodily perception and then, for example, discover things about yourself via this bodily perception that that are covered by socialization in our day-to-day heteronormative lives or normative structured lives in day-to-day situations. So I want to thank you for this presentation.
Thank you.
Gave me some new ideas.
Good. Good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our last speaker in this session, she's a sound artist and she's currently doing her PhD in Spain. She has been very active in many countries of this world, doing exhibition, concerts, lectures, workshops. I do remember the sound walk we do with Eric on the Azorean island. That was very nice. She focuses on the relationships between the concepts of memory, home, and landscape, also in representation of the construction of identity. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. Please welcome Amanda Gutierrez.
Thank you. So my lecture is going to kind of like be a response of the two lectures. And I think one of the elements that I want to highlight in this is that I have many of the questions that I've been hearing in other sessions, which I think is great to kind of recap those questions and be part of that conversation, because otherwise I don't think we will have that chance in another period of time, or we might not even meet another country. So I hope we can do that. I also have to say that after this lecture, one of the iterations, the video that I want to make mention is going to be down on the hall, and I hope it can be not only today, but maybe on the course of the time that we are in the conference, so you can have the time, because I think it's better if you have your own kind of like process of looking at that. And I hate PowerPoint because obvious reasons, so I'm going to just do it right here. So this is my lecture, and I will explain what is Flannery's or La Caminanta. So first of all, I'm going to speak about the iteration that you will see down in the hall. So this iteration was called Walking in Lightness, and it was an exhibition made in the Camera Club of New York in Baxter Street. And that kind of like welcomed me to New York City. So basically I did sound walks with a disposable camera in Sunset Park, and I was basically taking photos of images that have sound and have a very resonant meaning through my own relationship with the space. And then I developed everything in a black, in a dark room, which never ever done that before. But I kind of like wanted to take the risk and work with non-digital technology. And actually working with an analog technology brought me so many reflections that I have to put on this, which is Walking in Lightness, that you will see outside. And always, I consider myself kind of like the role of the ethnographer, which it was kind of pretentious. But then I start thinking in the dark room, okay, I'm always asking other immigrants, because that's all about my work, asking immigrants why you are here, why you moved there. And then in the dark room, I didn't have the choice but to ask myself why you are in here, why you are in the United States, why you moved here 15 years ago. And that answer was basically a very key point of reflecting into one of the main problems that are happening in my home country, which is Mexico City. And that's the reason why I moved here, which is the unsafeness in the street. Being a female subject, in a female identified subject per se, is like extremely dangerous. Not only queer, it's just like everything that is considered female right now is being attacked and is being under a lot of violence. So I moved 15 years ago to United States to basically respond, to be saved. And you will hear it in this film essay. It never ever like reflects so much in my vulnerability as an individual to be in another space, just as the simple right of walking. Working through my research and also all my teaching artist experience with the situationist and the idea of the flaneur. For the first time I have to think, the flaneur is a male subject. The flaneur is also a bourgeois who has a lot of time to go and wander. Not everyone can walk at 3 in the morning, not even at midnight, and not even like just drop all your experiences or all your work and walk around. I can't even do that. Sometimes I do, but I have to justify as an artwork. So that's a very important question, and I did this. Very important. What is the flaneur? Flaneurus, or la caminanta. So it's a French and Spanish word, or words, that technically doesn't exist, as the same concept of a female walker. So this one was made, this video was made with a 360-degree camera and a phone, which basically is also highlighting some of the ideas that you were talking about the extension of the cyborg. And I think in a way, when I was walking through these journeys, and I've been documenting this, the camera turned to be my eye, and the phone is extension of that eye, and then I can see everything around. And I have certain arguments that I have to say about technology, but this minimal technology can be also be deceiving and can also be kind of like hidden. So what that means, surveillance, right? So something that I'm like contradicting, and I'm also like trying to think through, critically speaking, about technology, why I'm using these tools, and also what the repercussion of these tools. Because they do, technology tools are not innocent. They do have many repercussions. They have a history, right? So, and I will talk about headphones too, because this is also not only a tool, but a weapon, or also something that protects you, at least me, in the city. And then this is a question, right? Is the public space safe and open to all bodies? Not only female, all bodies, right? It's inclusive. And I want to say that for me, it's not just going walk in the street. I do go through an art process. I depart from my own embodiment and experience, so I am a female body who, ethnically speaking, is considered Latina. I understand the political situation of the space, so it's not just like, the space are not white canvases, neither forest, that it's just, it has like some ecology, yeah, but in that ecology, which is the urban ecology, there is certain relationships. And if I want to do this, I have to share and create not only digital, but also through other mediums, cartography. And is that, this question about other bodies came when I was doing this class or this workshop collaborative workshop and then an artwork with senior citizens in Manhattan. They taught me everything about Manhattan more than if I were, you know, and went to the library. I mean, they were like telling me all the history. We were doing mapping. We were doing sound walks. A sound walk in a one-block radio, it took us 1 hour. So the time is different. When we were walking, we realized that the streets are not shaped for our bodies because, listen, right? And also, they do have 8 hearings. So what is the relationship of space and sound and this non-normative body, right? Like, what is the demand of New York City? And then we did a photo essay workshop of their sonic memories, and then we produced a vinyl record. So side A is like their memories. They did an essay about the sonic memories, and then the side B, you can hear the soundscapes of that. And for me, implying a technology that they are familiar with was very important, because if this is a collaboration, I didn't want to just impose like, oh, let's do everything digital. They feel really comfortable and they feel so charmed by the idea of coming back to something where they recognize from their own times. And then also this one in Soundscape Park, where I did the soundscapes and the work. So in this one, instead is English as second language. I will call embrace your own language. So the class is to learn English. But in the class we say like, yeah, but you have to embrace your own language. So there was like students from Middle East, students from Mexico, Puerto Rico, China, I don't know, like another, no, maybe more, like these countries. All of them spoke different languages. We mapped their own home. We shared the stories that they have with the recognition of their own space. We did sound walks, and we mapped those spaces. So what are their recognitions of these spaces through even drawing or writing? And of course, they found that my students from Middle East, they say, no, I hear like 7 languages. It's like, how is that? Well, because there is different languages in the Arabic language, and I didn't recognize that, for example. So, and then also they say, well, birds, dogs are another language. We have to recognize that are also non-human. And that's something that I never heard before, right? And that's very important, because then the space is not only open to one species, it's also the recognition of other elements without saying, this is noise, or this is negative because, you know, this is just a bunch of very loud music. They never express the idea of sound with negative connotations, which is also very interesting. And mapping other journeys is not only within the United States, where I feel familiar. I did this in Girona, where I wanted to do basically taking the stories of a specific space and kind of play the devil advocate against tourism, or tactical tourism. So I went to also elementary schools and high schools, and we did several walks, the reefs, and also we did mapping. How do they perceive the city? So it's very interesting, because it's like this division, right? This is the old town, this is a new town. There is a train that divides the city. Also, immigrant students were dividing not only the city, but their journey between the new country and the old country. And we did this, which is mapping the collective narratives. For me, is not only creating this, these elements of the space through drawing, but then let's do that and then go and use also technology. So we are now crossing the river and going to the technology side of this. So this is a digital catalog where you can see all the process, from implying and inviting students from different schools, making sound walks, making trash walks. So we take all the residues from a city, and the videos that I create after that. And you can hear here the soundtracks. Now, if you want, you can visit our website. The most important part in here is like how digital cartography now is taking another important step. And this is the feminicide map that one single woman is doing in Mexico. This feminicide map of Mexico is updated every day. And you can see that from 2018 only, this is the number of cases of feminicide. If you're not familiar with what is a femicide, femicide is the legal term for hate-related, gender hate-related crime, where it's perpetuated mostly by perhaps male or female, but against female-identified body. This is really what is devastating, and this is the problem that we have. The impossibilities of technology. I cannot take this camera in Mexico, even though if I want to do sound walks, talking to my mom, my cousin, to other female identified people who have been harassed, and they perceive this as a very, very big issue, because that's what I wanted to do. Well, I have to cover it. And guess what? How do you see this technology in this, you know, what is so-called? This is me talking, my mom speaking. But this is how it's going to be. So when you go to the 360 degree, it's going to be extremely abstract. Because it's like, what is that thing around? Well, that thing is a protection of the camera, which is speaking about how vulnerable we are, that not even technology can be taken. So a 360 degree has to be, you know, explored in this way. Now, important thing that I have to say, this is not only part of my experience. La Liga Peatonal is something, it's an organization that is working in Mexico City, not only for like female rights, for all rights of every walker in the city. And they are doing also gender-related awareness, but also a very important mission of creating this as, you know, a common ground for everybody. Now, if you've never been in, oh, what is that? I know it's so Boards of Canada, but you know what? I don't need the sound anymore. What is that coming from? From here? Okay, I don't know what is going on with this. Okay. Where? The second tab? Oh man. Boards of Canada, huh? Oh yeah, I see what it is, but now this is, yeah. Sorry. Well, very important. So if you're interested in other narratives and sound, Sounding Out is having a whole podcast of Chicana stories and also gender sound stories. And it's really amazing. I highly recommended you to go there. And it's not only for Chicanas, but also Latinx, and all other narratives that are related to this relationship between the non-binary body. So the work that I wanted to do is an immersive reality sound walk. And I'm going to start from the dark room. If you go and see the video, you will understand why the dark room is going to be the first element to make this navigation. So you will go in the dark room, and then you will go to all these different sound walks that I'm doing with different women in different cities. And then after you enter into the city, then you will enter as well into the introspective space where they feel safe. So I'm filming also another non-urban space that is very, very different from the urban. So some place where they feel safe and, you know, more comfortable. And how I'm going to do this also with my friend Wally. We are going to do the League of the Female Walkers, asking also other female walkers in Bed-Stuy and also Sunset Park to join us. And we hope we can create a virtual reality documentary that can be seen in your other extension of the body, which is your cell phone, and a cardboard VR, an app, and then you can navigate through these virtual spaces. And well, thank you.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. Well, we have here a little bit problems with the time. We want to, of course, stick also to the program, but still it would be good, maybe 1-2 questions to ask. Anyone has questions?
Also, if you want to, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, well, I just wanted to say thank you so much. It's so inspiring to see your work, and very much connects to, well, I'm not even doing this kind of work, but I want to, and I have some money to do it, so I would love to chat. Yeah, I love the idea of creating multimedia stories, opportunities to experience reality through another's body, through non-normative bodies, through marginalized bodies. I think it's so important.
Thank you. And if you want to see and make connected the dots of what I'm talking about, why a dark room, why feminicides and relationship of my own story in these sound walks, you're welcome to go and see anytime the video that is playing in this screen over there, and you can have your own time reflecting upon what is perceived. But it's, and it's 15 minutes, so you can sit there anytime. Yeah. And then if you have any questions, please reach me at the end of this conversation. I will be totally happy to talk more and have like a more one-to-one conversation with the persons here.
Right. Yeah. So you can see the film. Here is this 14011, and it's just around the corner in the corridor. So you will see the screen and a nice couch, and you can enjoy the film. So that's it. That was our session. Thank you very much to our 3 speakers.